Hey everyone, and welcome to the Music Made Me podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Be sure you are liking, sharing, following, subscribing to us on whatever streaming platform you're listening on. That support really helps us in coming back each and every week with new conversations. Now, today we're sitting down with Ryan from Throw the Fight. The band formed about 18 years ago, but Ryan is the only founding member in the band because they've gone through a number of lineup changes over the years. But that hasn't dampened their fight, tenacity, and drive in moving their music forward and continuing to gain a strong fan base. Please enjoy our conversation with Ryan from Throw the Fight. So this is like basically your job, hey? Aside from the band, like the promo stuff and like especially for your band and helping others out.
Yeah, I do a lot of web design and marketing consulting, and a lot of it's with independent artists, but I also do a lot with small businesses and stuff like that too. Music definitely does not pay the bills, let's put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. So when did the bug catch you to move over to the business side of things?
Been doing it all along. I started the band when I was going to college for graphic design in 2004. So I've kind of always been, doing the band stuff in conjunction with, my design and marketing career and just doing band outside of, just jobs and running my own business and things like that as well too. So luckily I've kind of always like positioned myself to be able to do both things.
So going into your career, it was more focused on the graphic design and the marketing side rather than focusing on the musician side then.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it wasn't really one or the other. They were both kind of, big focuses and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I'd say I easily spend just as much time, doing band stuff as I do, doing the entrepreneurial stuff as well too.
And when did the music bug catch you? What was your youth like? Were your parents musical? Was your family musical? Or was it sort of you discovering it on your own?
Yeah, it's a good question. My family wasn't very musical. My dad was a guitar player, but we didn't grow up with them playing music in the house like that. When I was I remember this, like I was 11 years old, I think, and he got me into Black Sabbath and Metallica, stuff like that. So that was the kind of point where I was like, oh, okay, this is really awesome, and I kind of went down, the rabbit hole of heavy metal and getting into like punk rock and more instrumental music and stuff like that. But my brother is our drummer, so him and I would just jam in our basement, growing up as kids, I would say from 11, all through our high school and middle school years, 11 to throughout high school, and that was just kind of how we like learned to play our instruments and things like that.
Nice. So you were self-taught then?
I took lessons for about 4 or 5 years, and then after that I just kind of ran with it on my own.
Right. And was it pretty natural for you? Not necessarily coming from a musical family, but did you pick it up pretty quick?
No, not really. Not that I remember. I started off playing piano, and I did that for about 6 months, and that was not fun at all. So, once I started playing guitar, that was kind of a little more of a fit for me. But no, I don't remember picking it up easily at all. I mean, I would rehearse for, 3 to 4 hours a day for at least the first few years.
And was that when you were like 11 years old that you were like practicing
totally.
3-4 hours a day?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So you learned young that you have to stick with it and grind to be able to be a musician.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. And you had that headspace way back then. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and back then it was more like just having fun and jamming and stuff like that. It wasn't something that we took very seriously until like, later on. So
right. And when did you start writing? Did I read that it was around 14, 15 that you started to write?
No, it wasn't probably until we were in college. I think I think when we were just growing up and learning how to play, it was more just like learning Sabbath songs and learning Metallica and just learning, learning stuff that we wanted to learn how to play. The first time I ever like performed in front of people, it was probably, I think we were in high school playing like a like a talent show or something like that. And we just got some people together and did like some Soundgarden and Pink Floyd covers. And I'm so glad there were not camera phones like back in those days,
Yeah.
because I'm sure it was absolutely terrible. But yeah, we didn't start writing until Throw the Fight started in 2003 and later on. And even then, we started out doing covers and stuff like that, just playing like house parties and little crappy bars and stuff like that around Wisconsin and the Minneapolis area.
Right. And there was 5 members to start out. So how did all 5 of you sort of find each other and realize that you wanted to form a band?
Yeah, so I mean, back then, I was playing in my first band. We were called Downward Play, and we used to play with, we would play shows with some of the just some other guys that were in local bands and stuff like that. And one thing led to another. Their bands ended. My band at the time ended, and we ended up starting Throw the Fight. But it was just it was just like-minded musicians, and that we kind of knew from playing a circuit together for the most part.
And was your debut in '04?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, technically we formed in 2003, but yeah, I don't think we probably didn't play, for at least a year or so after that point.
Right. But that seems pretty quick to kind of come together in '03 and then have something released in '04.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, actually, yeah. I mean, the funny thing is we ended up doing just a ton of terrible, terrible recordings, like that. Luckily, haven't seen the light of day at this point. But yeah, I mean, our first recordings were just like some demos that we had recorded on our own with myself and 3 of the original guys, and yeah, they were so bad, but it took us a few years before we finally like did our first like commercial release. And it was a 4-song EP called The Fire Within. It didn't come out until 2006, so a few years after we had kind of been grinding already. But that EP we ended up putting out on an independent label that was part of Warner Music Group at the time, and that was kind of our start like into the more formal aspects of the music industry, and just kind of like touring and marketing and things like that.
Yeah. How did that come about? Because if all your stuff was, like you say, crap leading up to that, and then you
It was
have this
terrible.
4-song EP, and
Yeah,
that seemed to hit pretty well, and all of a sudden, you're signing to a record label and stuff. So
yeah.
how did that all come about?
It came about, it was just me being in contact with a manager at the time. And it wasn't someone who was representing us specifically, but she was in contact with an A&R person over there, and they were looking for a rock band at the time, and she just referred them over to us. At the time, we ended up around that same time, we ended up getting our first big piece of press with alternative press at the time. And it was, it was more like a popularity contest. We had our fans vote us in as like one of the top unsigned bands at the time. So between that piece of press and me kind of working with this manager and just kind of like getting referred at the right time, the stars kind of aligned, and they ended up picking up our EP, and also our next album that came out after that, In Pursuit
Right.
of Small. Yeah,
And have you always been business minded like that, in
for sure.
sort of
Yeah.
knowing where to go and who to talk to and having that drive for the business side?
Yeah. Yeah. I've always loved the entrepreneurial and the marketing side of it. And, honestly, like that's the one thing that independent musicians need to understand, is because it's the music is one thing, but that's the easy part, like if you're not out there hustling and building your brand and building your business, you're not doing yourself any favors. So that's one thing that we kind of learned early on, between that and booking our own shows and booking tours and things like that. It's like no one's going to make this happen for you. You have to kind of go out there and make it happen for yourself. And once you kind of, I mean, things are a lot easier now, but back then you couldn't go like buy online courses about the music industry and music marketing. You just had to go out there and just kind of figure it out. And that's what we did.
And talk about MySpace and the amount of time you
Yeah,
spent on MySpace.
a lot of hours, many, many hours. Yeah. Yeah. We came up, during the MySpace and Pure Volume years. And I remember my girlfriend, now my wife, at the time, her and I would go, after college, after classes, we'd go to the library because they had a way better Wi-Fi connection than we had. And her and I would sit. I'd be at a computer, she'd be at another computer next to me, and we would just like message people on MySpace and Pure Volume and things like that, and just have a dialogue. It wasn't like anything spammy. It was just more or less just like having conversations with people that we thought were in our ideal demographic, and getting those people to listen to the music and sign up for our mailing list, and get in the loop on shows and stuff like that. And yeah, that was kind of how we grew it and built it. And I still do that stuff to this day, not with MySpace, but now it's more like Instagram and Twitter and stuff like that. But I still have, I spend a significant amount of time just having those conversations online behind the scenes with people, and it works really well.
And one of the business sides that I was really interested in was the fact that when you signed your first record deal, you were aware enough to have it in the contract that you got the originals when the contract expired.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would never ever recommend any artist to sign away their masters. A lot of deals do that. We've been fortunate enough to only sign licensing deals. So, we'll license those masters during the term. And then once that license period expires, then everything reverts back to us, and we can monetize it at that point again.
Right. Yeah, that's really smart.
It's more about like playing the long game, Yeah,
exactly.
You got to play the long game with this stuff.
Yeah. And going from album to album, it feels like every time going into an album, between albums, there was a lineup change.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, we've had our fair share for sure.
Yeah. And you guys, especially you, because you're the only founding member left, right? You've stuck with it all that time. So from the beginning, going from the first album to the second album and having those member changes, were you always in the mindset that it doesn't matter what happens in this band, I want to see it be successful?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like we've been together for 18 years, at this point, something like that, going quite a while. I mean, and any band who's been around as long as we have is going to go through that fair share of member changes, I think, over time. It's tough to find people who who are committed. I mean, and not so much that, but who are willing to commit to the lifestyle, because it's tough between all the scheduling with, writing and recording and touring and getting told no day after day after day. That stuff can wear on a person, so yeah, it's tough to find people who are willing to do that and commit, and luckily I think we're finally at the point where, with myself and my brother Jeff and Kate and Chris, I think we finally got it figured out. But yeah, it's especially when you're changing vocalists and stuff like that, like we have, I mean, you can change guitar players and you can change drummers, and you're not really going to change the sound of the music, but changing a vocalist is tough. And it's more or less like, you're just kind of like closing one chapter and opening another chapter. It's just a different transition period. But yeah, it's tough for sure. It sets you back a little bit, but you got to be willing to do it in order to kind of take those steps forward. So
right. And do you think it was because you're so business minded that you were able to stick with it, and you weren't looking at it like, oh, I want to get famous, I just want to play my music? You were looking at it from a different angle than a lot of musicians do?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a labor of love, and I think you have to go back to that point. Fame was never really a thing for us. I mean, in the early days, we would put a lot of pressure on ourselves to like write hit songs. Like we would always be like, okay, we're going in on this album cycle. We need to come out with 2 radio hits. We need to come out with 2 or 3 radio singles. And there was a lot of pressure at that point to do that. But, now it's more or less just like, let's just go do what we do. And if something comes out and it's got that vibe, great. And if not, that's okay too. Because at the end of the day, this stuff is so subjective, like we could think a song is going to be huge and it ends up, not doing anything. And then it's the song that, you wouldn't think that people really gravitate towards that ends up catching on a little bit. So it's more or less like now the name of the game for us is just to do things more consistently and put out less music more frequently instead of trying to focus on albums. Now it's more like, let's put out more and more singles. Let's do more EPs. Let's not drive across the country to play for, just the sound guy and do that because we've been there and done that. And that doesn't really move the needle, at all. So now it's more or less like just doing stuff that's more smart.
You talk about sort of that drive and, not going across the country to play for the sound guy. And you guys have had the chance to tour with some pretty big names. You've been on the Warped Tour.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Because I think when people look at that, they think, oh, you've made it. You're there. You're successful.
Yeah.
But does that necessarily mean that?
Definitely does not mean that. No. I think I love touring. I mean, I love playing shows, and I think that's always going to be like the heart of it. You can do all like the digital marketing that you want to, but it will never ever compare to like being there in person, and playing a show and being able to interact with people face to face. So that stuff is definitely important. Like playing and touring is definitely important. We never really did a ton of touring early on because, we were kind of going to school at the same time and we were working and things like that. We ended up doing a large tour years later. This was like 2013, a decade after we had already been a band, and came back from that. And it was a fantastic tour, put us in front of a ton of people, but we came back just, in a massive hole, a massive amount of debt. And that was kind of the moment where we were like, what are we doing here? Does this even make sense to keep doing this the way that we're doing it? And that was kind of the light bulb moment where we were like, what, we got to change what we're doing and kind of reconfigure things in order to make this more sustainable. Because by that point, we were all in our mid 30s, we've got kids and things like that. And it just wasn't sustainable.
And what's it like playing on the Warped Tour?
It's awesome. It's a lot of fun. It's hot as hell. Yeah, it's a lot of work though, because the Warped Tour, those lineups don't get determined, until the day of the show. So you have to load in at 7:30, every single morning, and then you typically don't find out what time you play that day until about an hour or so before the doors.
Oh, really?
So if you're playing Warped Tour, you might play at 11 a.m. and then you're at your tent selling merch until the show's over at 8 o'clock. Well, at 8 o'clock, you're loading out, but then you have an 8-hour drive, to the next, Warped Tour stop. And you need to be there by 7:30 a.m., and just do it over and over and over again. So, it's definitely, it's easier if you can do the Warped Tour like in an RV or a bus and you have a driver and a crew and people like that to help out. That definitely takes a lot of the pressure off and makes things easier. But, that was never the case for us. Like when we were doing Warped Tours, we were, renting an RV, but we were doing our own driving and we didn't have a crew or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, but a lot of bands, they still don't do that, but they just do it themselves. And that's the best way to learn. You just kind of start small and you keep growing.
And so every night on the Warped Tour, would one of the band members go basically without sleep and play the next day on no sleep, or?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of just have to like take shifts and stuff like that. I mean, you'd be rolling out of a venue, fairly early. I mean, like 8 o'clock, but then you'd be driving overnight. You're always driving overnight. So yeah, I mean, someone would have to, typically stay up with the driver just to make sure the driver didn't fall asleep, and hopefully make it there the next day. But luckily for us, we never had any scary scenarios or anything like that. And it worked out. So
Right. And talk about the album this year, because you
Mhm.
dropped Settle Your Sins this year.
Yeah.
Now, the pandemic was already started, because what was it, August, September when you dropped the album?
It was August of 2020. So it was it came out towards the tail end of last year. That album was a long time coming, and we had originally, obviously, we wanted to do some touring, in support of it, and at least like play some regional shows and stuff like that. And then COVID came around, and we kind of pumped the brakes a little bit, because at the time we were thinking that uh, it wouldn't last as long as it was, and we were hopeful that touring would be a thing, and we'd be able to play. Then as months progressed, we we ended up just like announcing it for March, and then we ended up pausing that date and kind of like playing it by ear. And then by the time the summer rolled around, it was like, okay, this isn't going to be happening. So we just decided to just put it out, and it was kind of like, it is what it is. It was one of those scenarios.
Yeah, and this was a long time in the making too, because you recorded it once, right? And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
Cade took over as a lead singer, so you had to do it all again.
Exactly. Yeah, we recorded it, and we had a lineup change with the front man, so we had to go back out to Pennsylvania to recut the vocals and have the whole thing, mixed and mastered again. So there was a setback with that, but at the end of the day, we love the way it turned out. I mean, it turned out great, and I think our fans dig it.
And you've gone through many ups and downs throughout the band, with members leaving, coming and going. And so going into this, where you feel that, you have the lineup, you're on that upwards trajectory, and then COVID hits, where does that land in the area of disappointments that you've had throughout your career, and just the frustration with that? And it feels like every time you're on your way up, something happens and throws a wrench in it. So how disheartening was this wrench?
It was up there for sure. I mean, I think 2020 has did a number on everybody,
Yep.
if
That's
I'm
for
being,
sure.
honest, but so I don't want to sound like, I'm complaining too much about it, because at the end of the day, like, we're all healthy, and we're doing well. So I mean, that's more like the most important thing, but yeah, it's a big wrench for sure. I mean, it cuts a huge source of income. It cuts a huge, I mean, just not only the income, but just being able to do like what you love doing. It's tough not being able to do that. But again, it's like, it's not unique to us. Everybody's in the same boat. And they can do that stuff. So it just it sucks all around.
You had the chance to tour with a lot of great bands, and of course the Warped Tour. And you've said in the past that Bullet for My Valentine was one of your highlights. What do you learn from bands like that when you're out on tour with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. You definitely learn, you know, like how to do this stuff at a very, very high level, and how to do it seriously, how to entertain a crowd, and things like that. And I think just be professional musicians. I mean, it's you got to be able to, obviously, like, you have to have the chops, you have to be able to play your stuff well, but it goes much further than that, and much more beyond that. You really have to not be a pain in the ass. If you can go on the road and you can hang with those bands and those crews, and at the end of the day, you're good people, that's what they're going to remember, and that's what matters.
Right. And as an opening band, I've heard people say that the one job I have is to outplay the headliner. So is that sort of
Yeah.
how you guys look at it as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much like outplaying the headliner, because no one, I mean, that's who everyone's there to see in the first place. So I mean, we know going into it that no one knows our stuff. I mean, it's more or less like, we're the opening band. No one is really there to see us. Or I should say, very few people are going to be there to see us. So our job at the end of the day is, to convert as many of those people who don't know us into evangelists afterwards and into fans, so, and just kind of like interact with those people. So, that was a large part of it, was just doing the shows and interacting with people as much as we possibly could, and shaking hands and doing all the stuff that you can't do at this point because of the pandemic, So
Exactly.
it's yeah. So I mean, it's more or less just like, yeah, just trying to interact with as many people and just kicking ass, to the best of your ability. Sure, you definitely want to go out there and play as good as you can. Yeah, but at the end of the day, you're only going to have so much control over that stuff.
Yeah. And as a headliner, of course, that's the goal. But as the opening act, is like, how much fun is it knowing that you have to have the energy, you have to put on a show that's gonna win over those fans. You're not necessarily going on stage saying, well, everyone's here to see me, so I can just play my music.
We love it, especially like when you can go and do it day after day, I mean, like that's how you get good. I mean, that's like the best way to perfect your craft, is by going out there and playing every day. So yeah, that is one of the benefits of touring and being on the road, is just being able to perfect your show and just get better and better and better. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, the first few days are rough because it takes a little bit of time to get into the groove and things like that. And then by day 4 and 5, you end up kind of like finding your rhythm, and then you just end up like turning into like this music machine across the whole thing, where it's like set up, play, mingle, drive, set up, play, mingle, drive, set up, play, mingle, drive. And that's the name of the game.
What do you think it's going to be like with fans when you get back on the road, and just the passion they're going to have for live music again?
I think it's going to be night and day difference. One thing that that this whole thing has made me realize is just like how much you take it for granted. So I think there's going to be a lot of that. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to imagine. I really don't know what it's going to look like. I think it's probably going to be tougher for bands at our level and bands, that are coming up to tour and to play shows, because I think, one, a lot of the venues that cater to like the smaller bands and the upcoming bands, they're going out of business like by the day, so there's going to be a lot less music venues, and just as many artists like vying for that, ever shrinking piece of the pie,
Well,
so
everyone's going to want to get out there, right?
yeah, exactly. So all the more reason, to be building up your online presence, because the more that you can do that stuff in preparation for, venues opening again and touring being a thing, that's just going to set you up for for more success down the road. But so that's one thing that I think independent artists should be, cognizant of. Yeah, but I think there's going to be a lot more competition, a lot more safety precautions probably, as there should be. And I don't know, other than that, it to be determined, I think.
And for you, going into your, what, 2021 would be the 18th year since you
Yeah,
guys met.
I think so. Yeah.
So you have that business side that you're passionate about, but how
Mhm.
have you managed to stay passionate about the music all this time when it's such a grind?
Yeah, I mean, I always try and go back to, I always try and go back to the music part of it, especially like if I'm feeling burnt out and things like that, which
Yeah,
happens often, so
I bet.
I'll I'll go back to to just like songwriting and playing guitar and things like that, so just taking that time for yourself, maybe like taking a little mental health break, working out, things like that. That stuff is super important to me. So I try and do that stuff as much as possible. But yeah, just always going back to the music and that whole side of it, the songwriting side of it, and the fun side of it, because that's what's the most important at the end of the day. I still like doing all the marketing and all the business stuff and things like that, because I'm weird like that, but uh, yeah, so I try and stay grounded with like the music when things get tough like that.
And did you guys come together to record the acoustic EP, or were you doing it in your different locations and sending it in for mixing and everything?
Yeah, we did it separately. So that was that recording session was unique. I mean, we each came into the studio to track our stuff, but we didn't do it together as a band. And it was easier because we weren't like doing any songwriting. The songs were already written. We were just kind of like reworking, the songs a little bit. So we didn't necessarily like need to be there together. But yeah, Chris and I would go in and do guitars with the producer. And then Jeff went in separately and did drums, and Cade went in separately and did vocals. And we would just kind of like text the stuff back and forth to each other and send mix notes and things like that back and forth. Yeah, we didn't do it like as a band at all.
Right.
So that was tough. But
yeah, it's tough, but like you talk about getting back to the music and the songwriting and just playing your instrument, like being in there with an acoustic guitar sort of by yourself, not with all the other band members. Was it refreshing to a point
oh
almost?
yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, I love being in the studio for sure. Yeah, yeah, that was fun.
And how does that differ from a regular, when you would record a regular album? Was it a lot more, well, I guess a lot more laid back, because like you say, the songs are already written, you know what you're doing, but in the way of just having people looking over your shoulder when you're playing and everything like that, was it just a lot more laid back?
It was definitely laid back. The biggest thing about doing recordings locally is it takes longer. That's the biggest issue. Not that it's an issue, it's just that it's just the nature of it. It takes longer because we're going in on the weekends and outside of work and things like that, to do tracking and stuff like that. Versus when we typically go out and cut records, we're flying out to whatever studio the producer that we're working with works out of, and we're living there for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, and we're only doing writing and recording and things like that. I much prefer to go to another location and track in a studio, so you don't have to have all the other distractions and things like that, and it just allows you to only focus on music. But that's not really a reality for us right now, so it's just kind of the nature of the beast at this point, where it's like we're just doing stuff locally and just kind of focusing on more like singles and EPs. And yeah, hopefully down the road, we'll do another record, but I would like to play some shows in support of the last record we put out first.
That's what I was going to ask you. Are you guys currently working on music, or are you taking a step back to just take a break and say, when things start to go back to normal, then we'll promote this record for a bit and then start thinking about the next one?
No, we're always writing, and we're always working on demos and things like that. So we're passing a bunch of tracks back and forth right now. We have a new single that comes out at the end of February. But yeah, I mean, it's more or less like the name of the game is just like doing some pre-production, doing some demos and things like that on our own, probably for the next couple months, at this point. And then we'll just kind of amass a bunch of stuff and kind of see what happens, probably later towards the spring, and we'll see what our options are at that point. We'll definitely be back into the studio and probably here in Minneapolis, probably tracking another, 4 to 6 songs at that point.
Nice. And I guess it's a pretty good indicator that you guys are ready to take this to the next level, considering that, this lineup was formed just before the pandemic hit. And if you guys can make it through this still as a strong band, that's a pretty good indicator that you all are ready to really drive this forward when it gets back to normal.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've had this lineup for quite a while. I mean, even though Cade hasn't been the front man, for more than a few years. Like he was our bass player. So, and Chris has been in the band for, 5 or 6 years at this point. So, we've been playing with the same dudes for quite a while at this point. And, if I'm being quite honest, like, I don't have the energy to like do another lineup change at this point. It's like, if we have to replace another singer, I don't know, like, I don't know if I have the energy, but yeah, I mean, it's more or less just like, just kind of like doing what makes the most sense for us. And it's nice because now we're kind of at a point where, we don't have to, we're fully independent. We can do what we want when we want to. And that's kind of like the name of the game. And the most important stuff for us is just kind of having that creative freedom to record and play and do whatever we want to around, our schedules, which are super hectic and busy because, not only myself, but all the rest of the guys, are entrepreneurs as well and run their own businesses and all of that stuff too. And, we've all got little kids. So it's just kind of like, even though we're not even like playing or doing anything, like I feel, busier than ever at this point. So,
well, this was supposed to be some downtime during the pandemic just to kind of recharge, right? But I guess not.
Exactly. No, you got to keep going.
Yeah, exactly. You have to. Well, thank you so much for your time. I've taken up taken up your time enough here. You got your work and your family to get back to. So yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. Have a good one. Talk soon.
You too. Okay. See ya. Thank you guys so much once again for listening. We really, really appreciate it. Be sure you are liking, sharing, following, subscribing to us on whatever streaming service you are listening on. That support helps us in coming back each and every week to bring you new and exciting conversations. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time on The Music Made Me.